Hello, this is Kris Nelson for evolveconsciousness.org. I just want to make some corrections to my previous information, just to bring you up to speed of where I'm going, based on where I've been. So the previous information that I've put out has been influenced by the information I've previously received, and the models and frameworks I've developed and come up with are a combination of influences from others that made sense and provided a framework and model to make sense of things, to make sense of questions and provide answers. In my work on the trivium method and on language and reality that stemmed from the trivium method, I began to understand the importance of reevaluating everything and not simply using the concepts and ideas and beliefs of others, but to reformulate everything in terms of grounding in reality. So when I've talked about truth level 2 as truth, love, good, right, morality, natural moral law, and also as true self, higher will, I have associated this with the previous frameworks and models from others I had come to learn, such as from Mark Basio. In my reevaluations and reassessment of these beliefs, I have managed to keep the truth of these models and frameworks that I've developed through the influence of other people's models and frameworks. But the only thing that changes is I don't associate it with belief in something that cannot be demonstrated, belief in another being, or in aspects of things in other realms or other parts of existence that are not in grounded reality. I understand the power of symbols and allegories and metaphors, analogy, simile, and parable, both from history as well as people who currently use them in order to make sense of things. When we create an analogy, it's a correspondence between one thing and the other, and this is where you have the law of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above, but this is blindly applied. Even though it is a powerful tool to help us imagine possibilities, we need to further verify them in grounding in reality. The speculative beliefs of, quote, God and other aspects that are not grounded in the reality we live in are not required in order to make sense of models and frameworks of morality and where we need to go. So my model and framework for truth level 1 being the reality that is, both its good and evil, beauty and horror, truth and falsity, is what currently exists as the condition. And that's the actual that is manifested. The truth level 2 was the potential to manifest, the possibilities that we can imagine. I had previously associated this within my understanding of other people's models and frameworks, such that it was a higher self and a higher will somewhere else. And this was the true self from somewhere else that we had to align ourselves with and mimic and become that thing that was somewhere else. So when you have truth, love, good, right, morality, natural moral law, that is the ought, that is what we should live by. That is the potential that we can live by, the possibilities that we can change ourselves into becoming aspects of. And this was associated with, again, those things that we could become, which were the true self, and the higher will. And then that's further associated with, well, the higher will is the will of the Most High. The Most High is God, the Spirit, so it's the will of the Spirit, the will of God, the will of Source, all one, the Creator and Generator, etc. So all these things were related under the newly acquired terminology that I had grasped, well, that I had gotten in reading the Trivium Method book by Sister Miriam Joseph, where she mentions transcendental being, and this relates to Plato and Thomas Aquinas. So these are just models and frameworks in order to try to understand these, the truth level 2, which doesn't yet exist, but it can exist because we can envision it existing and we can think of the ideal. You do not need to accept the fanciful belief of a true self, higher self somewhere else, and the higher will somewhere else, and the God somewhere else, and all these things elsewhere, and how we're trying to become that thing that is elsewhere. What I've come to understand in my reevaluation of these models and frameworks, these concepts, ideas, is that they were beliefs, and that they weren't verifiable, but these speculations, these ideas, provided a framework or model in order to tie things together. And it did tie them together, but it was based in belief. I have since removed the belief aspect, the speculative aspect, and the model and framework I've developed still holds true. Truth level 2 is still accurate. What we should and ought to become as a potential to actualize in the reality we live in is truth, love, good, right, morality, natural, moral law. As we actualize, realize, and individuate ourselves more into this capacity, this is our authentic capacity. This is the self-examined journey to authenticate ourselves in truth, because truth is authentic and falsity is inauthentic. That's why the false self is what has an aversion to truth, love, good, right, morality, natural, moral law. And why we keep living in the false living as false selves, because we're not actualizing, realizing, and individuating ourselves in truth and morality. And the true self, higher will still applies. It just makes even more sense. You're not removing it from yourself as something else outside of you that you're trying to progressively become as a thing existing somewhere else in some other realm, some other reality, some other sphere of energy, or whatever you want to believe, as if it's some soul or spirit that each one of us has, or which I viewed as false even back then. I viewed it as a one force that we all strive to become and conform to, which is the truth. The truth isn't an individual thing, it's the one thing. So that's what the true self and the higher will was that one thing we're trying to become, all of us, as higher order consciousness beings. But in re-evaluating that conceptual framework, I realized where the belief was, and I've removed the belief and grounded it more in the actuality of existence in this reality. And you don't need to believe in other things, even if they are true, other beings and quote God and quote spirit and quote all oneness and quote the absolute God and the omnipotent, and all these speculations and these imaginations in order to provide answers to questions in reality and to make us seem like we can be greater than ourselves and evolve and ascend and transcend into energy beings and all these things. It's all coupled into New Age and theology and religious control to make you feel good and get you to live a certain way. So the truth will make you feel good and get you to live in a certain way, but when you have belief mixed in, it brings in the belief aspect that is not required. So the true self, higher will. Well, it's not the higher will of the Most High, it's not the higher will of God. That's just how people anthropomorphize, personify, and project ourselves onto other things that are imagined and speculative ideas and concepts that end up being beliefs and speculations that aren't grounded in reality. They're just purely imaginal. They come from our consciousness, and because they sound good and they make us feel good, well, we accept them and propagate them to others, and people accept them, etc. But the true self, why is it called the true self? Because it's the self that is true, as opposed to the self that is false. When you live in falsity and you accept falsity, that's the false self. When you live in truth and you accept truth, that's becoming the true self, an authentic self from self-examination of reality and ourselves. Because we have the human condition of whatever the human condition is, and then there's what you can view as human nature. So nature has multiple levels as well to it. So you have human nature, we can do good and evil, and the real human nature is to do good, not evil. Doing evil is the false self, not the true self. The true self is living in truth. It's just simple, it's right in the word. The false self is living in falsity, it's right in the word. That's the true self, which is the true nature, our higher nature. That's our higher self. We can become what I am now is a higher self than what I was before, and what I will become is a higher self than what I am now. So it's just relative to where you are. It's always becoming a higher self through self-examination, through that inner alchemical work to better ourselves. So the human condition is what is, and we can become more of the human nature, our true nature, our higher nature, which is to be a real human being, and that's why you have transcendental being. Well, that's part of being a real human being. It all comes from our consciousness. We're all imagining this and trying to make sense of reality in ourselves, but we're relating it in previous beliefs, in fantasy and speculation about answers we have imagined or were provided with, especially when you look into the religious and theological aspects and the rituals. Well, all those beliefs came from there. They might have been originally developed in a less deceptive and manipulative intent, but they were used for control later on. So the human nature, the true nature, the higher nature is the true self, and the higher will is, instead of the lower will you realize what is a higher will, and you become a better will, a higher will. You become a better self, a higher self, a truer self. It's all about truth and falsity. It has nothing to do with quote God and quote souls and quote spirits somewhere else outside of you and quote higher self and quote higher will, quote true self somewhere else that we're trying to bring in, and we're going to channel and connect to it, and it's talking to me and all this nonsense. You're just talking to yourself. It's all coming from you. So I've talked about this in recent audios in bits and parts, but I just wanted to make a correction on how my model has changed, where I do not associate all of these concepts with things outside of us, but they're actually within us that we have anthropomorphized, personified, and projected outwardly as external forces. because that's the only way we could make sense of it. Well, it's not, oh, well, it can't be me, look at how I am now. Oh, it's got to be something else that I'm working towards. It's got to be, well, that's true in a sense, we're working towards the truth, but I'm talking about, oh, well, I'm going to become one with God, and I'm going to become one with the Spirit. I'm going to be spiritual. I'm going to become the true self. I'm going to become the higher self and the higher will as this thing out there in another reality, in another dimension, and as an energy being or as its own personality or identity. That's all anthropomorphizing, personification, projection, in an attempt to understand ourselves and reality with reference to something outside of ourselves, because it currently isn't us. So of course, but you can bring this all back down to reality and understanding simply a better way of living, an ideal, is a potential that you imagine yourself and you work towards making it happen. But it all comes from you. You imagined it, or someone else imagined it, and they influenced you, and you accept it as better than what currently is. That's why it's the current human condition versus human nature. The current condition is related to what currently is, and mostly in falsity, even though there's good in the current human condition. And then there's the human nature. You know, we can do good and evil, but the real human nature is to strive towards the good. Truth, love, good, right, morality, natural, moral law. Truth level 2. So you don't need to believe in anything out there, some supernatural forces or anything like that, which is where my work was based in, because I was influenced by other people's work and I had less of an understanding of the trivium method and how we develop references to reality through language and the power of symbols and the influence of symbols and language and word magic, which I've developed in the past few months and I've been sharing with others. But it has forced me to reevaluate and reconstruct the frameworks that I've accepted from others and ground them more in reality and less in the speculation and belief of something out there that you can't even know. It just comes from your mind. It's the only place it comes from is your consciousness. People believe these things because it provides an idea, a concept, to make sense of a framework and model of understanding ourselves in reality. So we create the force, we imagine a force, and we imagine supernatural aspects, and oh, well, that's the higher self, and it's the true self, and that's the higher will, and some people think that that's your soul and the spirit that has its own personal, individual identity. Or you can view that as not existing, and you can say, well, the true self, higher will is God and spirit, and the all in the one, and it's at the beginning of creation, it's before creation and all that. These are just beliefs. These are just phantasmagorical imaginations from our mind, trying to make sense of things, trying to provide answers to questions. But when you reevaluate them with an understanding of how language and symbols and the influence and how we reference reality, then you can ground yourself more in reality without these speculations that you once thought were true, that you once thought were accurate. I can't prove them untrue. You can't prove something that isn't. It's up to the people who say something is to prove that it is. You can't prove a negative. That's why in crime the person who's accused of something can't prove their innocence. You can't prove something that didn't happen. If you accuse me of murder and I didn't murder anyone, how can I prove that I didn't do something? It's something that doesn't exist. A non-murder cannot be proved. You have to prove the murder. So if you're going to claim speculative beliefs and concepts, you have to prove them. And ultimately you can't. It just remains in the realm of consciousness and imagination in belief. Because that belief provides you with aspects to formulate a framework and model that has a semblance of coherence, because you have to have the faith in that belief for that framework and model as it's presented in order to be valid. Otherwise, the framework and model, once it's not understood properly, you bring in those speculative beliefs in order to make it coherent. Because without it, it's missing that part, and then you have unanswered questions, you have unknowns, and we don't like unknowns. We need to make things known. The Mark Passio says the ego doesn't like absolutes. The imagination loves absolutes. It loves to make things absolute and known for sure, 100% certainty. The ego doesn't like to say, I don't know. It doesn't like to say, I am wrong. Because that's related to, I don't know. It really doesn't like, we don't like to say, I don't know. You can say that's the ego, whatever, I don't care. It's part of consciousness. We don't like to admit we don't know. We want to know. We want to have answers to questions. When you don't have a question, when you have an unknown, well, there's the fear of the unknown. The unknown is uncertainty. It's doubt. That can be uncomfortable to have that doubt and that uncertainty, and it's insecurity to have the fear of the unknown. So if you have a framework and model that's missing pieces because the only way you can formulate them is through speculative belief to try to patch these holes, these gaps of unknown, so then you begin to favor your belief and have faith in your belief in the speculative concept and idea because it provides a stopgap for the holes in the framework and model. It provides an answer to the question, answers the unknown, which removes the insecurity, the discomfort, and the doubt. So the faith and the hope and the belief maintains the self-delusion in a security, in a certainty, in a comfort that comes with having an answer to a question that would otherwise be unknown and provide you with that fear and confusion and insecurity, and discomfort and doubt. So I have no problem with doubt, curiosity, and questions. That's part of care for truth. And I've since brought that up even into more importance through my understanding of how we come to understand reality, how we formulate language and symbols to reflect reality, and how they can be used against us to create speculative beliefs and have us believing in things we can't verify. So yeah, you can imagine whatever you want. It could be true. Like I said, I can't prove something that isn't. If you're going to say it is, then you have the burden of proof to prove it. But it's only speculative. It's only in your mind. And this ties into the feel-good deception and how we use our emotions to value knowledge and value truth as a salience and feel something sounds good and feels good because it provides us with an answer to questions of the unknown that we have a fear of, that creates confusion and insecurity and discomfort and doubt and uncertainty. Like I said, consciousness does not like that. When we are stuck in needing things to fit and we don't have the answer, we need an answer. We'll create an answer. We'll invent an answer. That's the history of humanity. Just go look back in history at how powerful belief is. It's happening right now. It's really powerful right now, but people can't see it. It's everywhere. The Western Empire, American Empire, globalization. People are oblivious. You go back 7 years, you have Nazi Germany. Look how blind people in Nazi Germany were to how great their country was and how great everything that was going on with the National Socialism. Go back 100 years, go back thousands of years. There's the Inquisition hundreds of years ago. That was all belief. It wasn't reality. Consciousness is powerful and it's also weak, because we can easily manipulate and be easily manipulated through the power of imagery and symbols, because it relates to imagination and it can feed our insecurities, our doubts, our uncertainty, our confusion, our discomfort, and our fear of the unknown. As I've been saying, even before this reevaluation, we have great power as higher order consciousness beings. With great power comes great responsibility. We have the power to create great good or great evil. As well as that, as I've currently been stating, consciousness is a double-edged sword with the imagination factory and abstraction engine of higher order consciousness. We can imagine possibilities and potential of better ways of living, but we can also imagine pure fantasy and speculation. It doesn't make it true. It just makes it from our imaginations of consciousness in order to try and attempt to provide an answer. The problem comes with attachment to these beliefs. So sure, imagine and have beliefs and think of possibilities. You can have millions of possibilities, but do not get attached to them as a certainty. That's where the problem is, and that's where I've been reevaluating my frameworks and models that I've been putting forth and removing the aspects of belief. I've been letting go of the attachment to those stopgaps in my framework and model and allowing, I don't know, allowing uncertainty, allowing doubt, allowing unanswered questions, allowing the discomfort that might come with not having a coherent, full picture right away. But give it a bit of time, a few hours, a few days, and you can reconstruct those concepts, frameworks, and models so that they make even more sense than they did before. But you have to allow that period of unanswered questions, the fear of the unknown, the confusion, the uncertainty, the doubt, the insecurity, and the discomfort that comes with all of that. So you previously are attached to a belief, and it provides you with that false security and false comfort. And then you think you're found, and it makes sense, it does make sense. But then you don't understand the power of belief and imagination. And once you do, then you can look back and say, whoa, wait a second, maybe I am attached to some things, and maybe I have accepted some things blindly simply because they did make sense and they sounded good because I didn't have an answer before, and now this new answer makes things make sense. It provides stopgaps, it fills in the holes with speculation and belief, what I call fantasy, because it comes from imagination, either from your own or from other people's. That's where it comes from. It comes from other people and your own consciousness. These concepts and ideas would not exist without the consciousness in order to fabricate them, to create them and invent them. That's the power of consciousness, the double-edged sword of creating beliefs and then in the unreality of our subjective reality and then projecting them onto reality as if it was true. If you look at just reality, you don't have all these conceptions and beliefs through the power of the abstraction engine in consciousness as an imagination factory. It just wouldn't be there. We only have all these ideas because of each other, because of consciousness within ourselves and within others. So you could just be a one man and invent a bunch of things, but when other people invent things and we bounce it off each other and we provide answers to questions and they sound good and they feel good and we keep going and going. But if it's not grounded in reality, then how accurate is it? It's just coming from consciousness, from imagination, from trying to fill holes, to answer questions, to fill the hole in the big picture, in the big puzzle, providing puzzle pieces, but they're not accurate puzzle pieces. It's speculation and belief. They could be true, but again, you'd have to demonstrate and prove it to be true. I have reevaluated my models and frameworks, and I've removed these speculative aspects, and now what I can demonstrate is even more grounded in reality, more grounded in myself and other people, in reality, not in something somewhere else, some force, some supernatural thing, some being somewhere else, some soul or some spirit somewhere else. That's all within us. It's all in consciousness. So I'll get into this at a future date, and it'll be part of my new work on natural moral law, as I've reevaluated that over the past few months as well, and recognized the aspects of belief and speculation that made things sound good and fit right, but were not right and accurate, as is being espoused popularly by Mark Passio as natural moral law. I've reevaluated that and have fixed some errors and holes that I've recognized through my own development and refinement of how to process reality and how to understand how consciousness functions in psychology. So I'll leave that as it is for now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.